All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Joe Bellick. I'm the chair of the Cannabis Advisory Board. I want to start by thanking Roswell for hosting us and being so gracious and generous for this meeting and other meetings. It's great to be here in Buffalo. It's our first meeting outside of New York City. I spent 3 years here attending UB Law School and living on Hewitt Avenue off of Bailey. And it's good to be back in this great community. We're going to start today with a meeting of our Industry and Market Subcommittee that's chaired by Pete Schaefer, who's joining us virtually. And I just wanted to start by thanking Pete and Alan Gandelman, who's here in person, for all the work that they've done, not just on this subcommittee, but also in encouraging and advocating for farmers and other licensees. They put in a lot of time, uncompensated time, both on this subcommittee, but also generally to advocate for farmers and other licensees. And a lot of the recent changes and things that have been done, like the waiver and other things, the potency tax, they have a big role to play in it. And people in the industry should thank them for the time that they put in personally and professionally on this. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pete.
Thanks, Joe. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Hello, welcome, everyone. I'm Pete Schaefer, chair of the Cannabis Advisory Board Industry and Market Subcommittee. Recognizing we have a majority of board members present, I'm pleased to call to order another meeting of the Cannabis Advisory Board's Industry and Market Subcommittee, and to welcome all of you who are participating in person or via real-time live stream. I'd also like to note that voting board members such as myself, Alejandro Alvarez, Dr. Janella Chin, Gary Johnson, Nikki Cateman, Armando Rosado are joining via live stream from a private location due to extraordinary circumstances that restrict travel. As always, this meeting is being live streamed. Live captioning is available in both English and Spanish to individuals watching online. This meeting is also being recorded, and the transcript will be available to the public on the OCM website, cannabis.ny.gov. Additional information on Cannabis Advisory Board meetings is available on the OCM website. Now I'll go over the agenda for today's Industry and Market Subcommittee meeting. So next we'll have a presentation from the office. John Kajia, Director of Policy, will give us a market update overview on delinquent payment plan, pre-operational inspection reminders. Then we'll dive into a subcommittee discussion. We have a few bullet points we want to cover, and that'll be it for the industry and subcommittee meeting. Let's see. Okay, so just some welcome remarks. Welcome and thank you again, committee members who are joining in person today in Buffalo. I'm sorry I couldn't make it myself. To kick things off, I'd like to revisit the mission and purpose of the subcommittee. The Industry and Market Subcommittee has been formed to provide guidance and recommendations about issues related to cannabis licensing, license application process, cannabis licensing, banking, market stability, industry development, i.e. cultivation, seed to sale system, etc. I look forward to continuing these important discussions as we continue standing up this new industry. For our next agenda item, I'm going to pass it over to John Kajia to provide some market updates. John, please take it from here. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Pete, and thank you to the board members, and thank you to everyone who has come to attend this meeting in person and who is joining us online. John Kagia, Senior Director of Policy at the Office of Cannabis Management, and I'm delighted to continue the discussion we've been having on the state of growth and evolution of New York's legal cannabis market. And, you know, one of the kind of baseline reference numbers that gives us an orientation of the emergence of legal cannabis in New York is our retail sales data. Between March and April, we saw an increase in our monthly retail revenue from roughly $33 million to $38 million, a 15% month over month increase. And since we launched the program, launched our retail sales in January 2023, we've now generated nearly $284 million. But one of the data points that I think is starting to get really compelling as we look at how quickly the market has started to scale is the number of retail stores that we have reporting into us each month. So if you look at kind of the bottom of the bar chart, you have the numbers of stores that we have operational on average across each month. And, you know, we started off in January of 23 with one store. By December of 23, following the end of the injunction that had delayed our retail opening, we had 32 stores open. And since then, we've opened an additional, 53 stores. So for April, we averaged 86 stores reporting, and we currently have over 130 stores that have been approved to operate. We've basically been growing about 20 stores per month, and we're expecting that to actually start to ramp up beyond that based on the the accelerated pace of licensing that's coming. So very strong indicators already. I was looking at the data from the last week of April coming to the first week of March, and we're already on pace to shatter the numbers that we saw in April. So a very bullish outlook for where we are. And I want to drill in just a little bit because we're only 2 weeks out from 420, and there was a lot of interest in how sales were going to perform on 420. So when we last convened, we were proudly crowing that we had just broken $8 million a week for our weekly sales. We'd started trending up toward 9 million in sales, but the week of 420, we saw nearly $11 million in sales that week, and across all of our retailers, we saw roughly 30% week over week increase in demand. So. And I think that was driven by convergence of things. We had our retailers, drive a lot of engagement with consumers, help them kind of prep for the 420 activities. There was a lot of discussion in the week ramping up on what to expect and how to prepare for 420. And clearly, there was a lot of consumers who 420 was something that was well understood, but this was one of the first times that they could participate in 420 through legal channels. Finally, it also helped that 420 was on a weekend. And so, as part of our walkabout, I popped into Washington Square Park, and having now been there 2 years in a row post-legalization, the weekend certainly helped drive engagement. There's folks who had free time and were able to come out and celebrate the day. So even though we've seen a slight decline from 10.8 million because of the 420 bump down to 9.8, at 9.8 million for the week after 420, that would still have been the best performing week we've had. So it's dropped a little bit since then, but still higher than we had been on trend for prior, and I think a good indication of the momentum that continues to build. And then a final kind of lens in which to think about the pace with which we're growing, which is comparing our revenue growth over the 2 years. So in 2023, year in total, we did $160 million in sales, including about $10 million that we did through the Cannabis Grower Showcase program that ran for the second half of 2023. We are already on, we've already done through end of April, $132 million. By the end of May, we will surpass our 2023 total. And so by the time we get through the first half of 2024, we're expecting to be in the $200 million range, if not more than that. So really good momentum for the year. Very excited to continue to get more stores opening. Through the course of the CAB meetings we're going to have today, there'll be more discussion about enforcement. But one of the things that, as we think about how growth is expected to evolve in the months ahead, is the catalytic effect that we start to see as enforcement starts to constrict the access to the unregulated market, specifically the stores that are operating illegally. We're expecting that to help further drive consumers into the legal regulated environment. So tremendous momentum so far, $38 million for the first quarter of 24, for the second quarter of 24 through April, puts us on great pace. And I think this is just going to continue to accelerate based on the continued acceleration of licensing and the ramp up in our enforcement efforts following the approval of the new enforcement powers. So with that, there's a few other points that we wanted to set the table on as we look out some of the work that the office is going to be doing in the coming months, and then two, to help prepare our licensees, particularly our pre-operational licensees, to make sure that they're addressing some of the issues that we have seen that have impacted how quickly folks are able to get their doors open. So first, wanted to revisit delinquent payments. The program was just going live at our last CAB meeting, and wanted to just kind of remind folks what this delinquent payment program is and how it is being implemented. So first, delinquent reporting happens when retailers are more than 30 days late on their payments to their suppliers. Once a retailer has hit that 30-day payment threshold, their suppliers are required to report them to the office, and at that point, following that notification, the retailer is put on a delinquent payment reported list. When a retailer is on the delinquent payment reporting list, it ends, at least it puts on hold their ability to purchase product on credit. All products, when a licensee, when a retailer is on the delinquent payment list, must be done as cash on delivery. And so the part of the privilege of being timely in your payments is to ensure that you can continue to operate on a credit-based model. But once you're on the delinquent payment list, the retailer is no longer able to accept product on credit and must pay in full for the product they're receiving on delivery. Once the supplier has received their payment in full, they will notify the office that the retailer has paid out what is owed, and then the office will remove that retailer from the COD list, from the delinquent payment list, and then they'll be able to resume their payment as scheduled. The delinquent payment list is published monthly. We have extensive information about the delinquent payment, how the process is managed on our website, so please review the FAQs if you're not familiar with that. And then the office makes available to our suppliers all of the retailers who appear on that list. For the suppliers to report the delinquent payments, please submit the retailers via COD reporting at ocm.ny.gov. And if you have any additional questions, you can send them through that email as well. To date, the delinquent payment process has been somewhat limited. We know that this has been a profoundly busy season for many of our operators. They're out building relationships with all of these stores that we have had open. We've now opened nearly 100 stores since December. But we just want to remind folks that this is a regulatory requirement, and the office does expect adherence to these regulations, both amongst retailers who should be timely in the payments and amongst the suppliers who will be required to report this. So, second kind of set of notifications and reminders that we wanted to communicate. First is for our adult use conditional cultivators and our adult use conditional processors who are in the process of transitioning from conditional status to full and final licensure status. All applications to transition from an AUCC or an AUCP were due on May 3rd, last Friday. And we saw a tremendous amount of activity in the first couple of days of May as folks were getting those applications in. So thank you for everybody who submitted those applications on a timely basis. Those licensees who did not submit their applications in a timely way, or who did not intend to continue to operate under the conditional license status, may apply to the office for authority to continue to operate until the determination is made on the status of their license. However, the conditional operation, the authority to operate on a conditional basis expires in June, and at that point, all cannabis activity must cease. For our producers, you cannot grow, minimally process, package cannabis. For the conditional processors, you cannot manufacture, sell, or distribute product. All operations must cease at the end of the conditional period. And then a final point for our adult use conditional cultivators, which is an important update to the ability to transition and secure processing capacity. We have expanded the processor authorizations for our conditional cultivators, so they are eligible to transition to both a Type 1 and a Type 2 processor. Not just to the Type 3 quote-unquote brand license. And with the ability to transition to a Type 1 or Type 2 processor, just a reminder that those two types of processors do have GMP requirements. So please make sure that you're going to be able to adhere to those requirements as you make those application requests. And then finally, for our transitioning licensees, just a reminder that the distributor license is a separate license once you have made the transition. So if you are a conditional processor or conditional cultivator who was self-distributing prior to the expiration of the conditional period, you will need a distributor license to continue to distribute your product post-transition. The ability to secure the distribution license, that remains open after you've transitioned, so there isn't a cutoff there, just flagging that you will need that if you're going to continue to distribute your own product. And for those who had registered with the Department of Tax and Finance and were doing self-distribution under the CCCP program, you will need to re-register with the Department of Tax and Finance, make sure that your payments are being captured there. Given that the board recently voted to waive the licensing fees for the transitioning adult use conditional cultivators, for the licensees who had made the payment of the licensing fee before that fee waiver went into effect. The office is working on a process by which we will refund you for that license payment. We'll just need a few weeks to get that done, so please give us 4 to 6 weeks to implement those reimbursements. But just wanted to reassure folks that if you had made the payment for your licensing fee, that fee is going to be waived, and it will take us a month to month and a half to process those reimbursements. For our retailers, we wanted to make sure that we were all aligned on some of the requirements that can help ensure that your pre-operational inspection will go smoothly and that we will be able to get your stores open as quickly as possible. So in discussion with the compliance unit, there's several things that we have found that have negatively impacted the ability for our retailers to get open because they weren't quite adherent to the compliance rules. So just wanted to call out a few of these. So first, on your security camera requirements, you are required to have a 60-day retention policy. This is standard across the market. Not 30 days, not 45 days, it is a 60-day requirement. So please make sure you have that. 2, if you have a certificate of occupancy, do make sure that it reflects the business that you are operating, and specifically make sure that your certificate of occupancy meets the municipal requirements for the COOs. We understand that some municipalities approach the certificate of occupancy process differently, but if you require COO to be updated by the municipality, please make sure you have that done before you request the pre-op inspection. Also related to security, point of our security requirements is to try and ensure the safety and security of both personnel and of the high value product and capital that is on site. So we've encountered several instances where the coverage of the security cameras on site didn't adequately cover the entire property. So there were blind spots, there was furniture moved in the way of the security cameras. And so please look closely at the coverage of your security apparatus, your security infrastructure, to make sure that the entire facility is visible through the security footage. PLMA. Under our packaging, labeling, marketing, and advertising rules, there are several rules around signage, both inside and outside the store. We urge you and remind you to review the PLMA rules as they are currently to ensure that you are complying with those rules. Unfortunately, we've had several instances where folks really stretched on their interpretation of these rules and had to make adjustments that delayed them getting open. The rules currently are what they are. We are certainly having a robust discussion, and we're going to discuss some of that this afternoon on potential amendments to PLMA. But based on the rules as they currently are, please make sure you're in compliance there. 2 final things on inventory and inventory management. One is as we kind of prepare to start transitioning to BioTrack, we are still in the weekly inventory reporting template workflow in which every retailer is required to report to the office their inventory on hand and their sales via flat files to the office. The office has a template that we have iterated several times. Many of our retailers are reporting these now in a very seamless way. So please study that and make sure you've got this dialed in. It'll really help streamline things for both sides as you're getting operational. And then the final point, and this is really the one I wanted to stress because it's caused a lot of anxiety for a lot of our operators. please do not schedule your opening until we have completed your pre-ops inspection. We've had several folks kind of schedule their pre-op inspection or schedule their openings, and then at midnight before telling us that we need to get our staff over to their facilities at 8 a.m. so that they could be ready for the grand opening. Folks, it just doesn't work that way. And it can't work that way because it's not fair to you to ensure that you and the community that you're rallying to support your operations have the best experience possible. And two, given kind of the amount of work that the team is currently dealing with, it works most seamlessly if everybody's able to schedule out the work and get this done. So can't stress enough, please don't schedule your openings until you have your pre-ops inspection scheduled, especially because we have seen enough instances where we have found things that folks have had to go and remedy that have delayed their openings. We just don't want you to have to deal with that. So don't schedule until you've gotten the green light to proceed from the office. Quickly on FAQs around the market's operationalization. So the office has been working on a series of frequently asked questions that will help all of our stakeholders better understand the licensing process, where we are in the license review process, and what's going to happen on the next steps. The FAQ document is very substantial, and it covers everything from how the queuing of licensees was done, of applicants was done, how the review process is working, and what the outlook is for the market's rollout. But one of the questions we've certainly gotten a lot of that I just wanted to offer as a teaser before we roll out these FAQs likely at the beginning of the week next week is a question around this queuing of applications. So we had two, broadly speaking, application pools. Those who applied in November for retail and microbusiness licenses with locations, and those who applied in December for the retail, microbusiness, and other supply-side licenses, processing, cultivation, and distribution. For each pool of applications, for the applicants who qualified for extra priority, and extra priority, to remind everyone, were folks who are from communities disproportionately impacted by cannabis prohibition, whose income was 80% of the median income in the jurisdiction in which they lived, and who had a cannabis prosecution for themselves or somebody in their family. For the applicants who qualified for extra priority, each of the applications was given 2 additional spots in the queue. But all other applications were included in the pool as single applications, so a 1-for-1 for each application. The office then used a random number generator to generate a sequence of numbers that reflected the number of applications in the pool. So, for example, if there were 1,000 applications in a given pool, the random number generator would create a sequence of numbers from 1 to 1,000 that would correspond to each licensee, to each applicant. That random number generator sequence then became the order in which the queues were going to be received. Random number generators are created using a seed number, and that seed number ensures replicability of results. So using a random number generator, you will input the seed, and then the random number generator will algorithmically use that seed to generate the sequence of numbers from 1 to 1,000 in the example I just gave. To ensure true randomization of the random number generator seed, we used the pick 4 lottery numbers drawn from the afternoon, the win 4 lottery numbers drawn from the afternoon that the randomized queuing took place. So the lottery numbers, the 4 lottery numbers served as the seed for the random number generator, and that ensures that if you used that number that was the lottery numbers in the random number generator, you'd always get the same result. It ensured that it was a totally random number that was used as input. We literally waited for the results from the Pick 4 lottery to occur, and as soon as the drawing happened, we took those numbers and inputted them into the RNG. And this entire process was audited by an independent third party to ensure that essentially these elements of randomization in the use of the lottery numbers and in the use of the RNG adhered to the protocol as designed for true randomization. So a bit technical, but just wanted to help explain kind of how the queue was generated. And this is just one of the dozens on dozens of questions that we go into quite robust detail on the FAQs that are forthcoming. So we encourage all of our stakeholders to review the FAQs once published no later than the beginning of next week. I think it's going to provide a lot of kind of clarity on process and implementation of our process. One final point to close. We have 3 very significant reports on deck through the end of the year that are I think, going to be very relevant to the work being done by this subcommittee. So the first that's due in October 2024 is what we're calling the implementation study. And the implementation study, it is required by the law, and it requires us to review how effectively or how successfully we have been able to achieve the key goals of the MRTA, the New York's cannabis law. And it allows us to kind of benchmark our process for assessing our performance, the data that we are collecting or the data processes that we're going to need to institute to ensure that we can continue to monitor our performance relative to the goals as described in the MRTA. Second is what we're calling the market report. And this is going to be closer to an economic study that looks at 2 key aspects of the market. One is, how effective has the office been in achieving the social and economic equity goals of the market? 2, how effective has the programmatic kind of implementation of this market been in achieving market fairness? So how is the opportunity in this market spread across the state and spread across the stakeholders? Are there ways in which are there opportunities to assess some of the rules to enhance the ability for the stakeholders in the market to compete in a fair and equitable way? And what lessons have we learned as we look out at the first couple of years of retail sales, first 3 years of the program to grow the program? And then finally, how are we doing with our supply chain? How are we doing with the building and the balancing of our cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, and retail? And then finally, we have the annual report, which, as we have done in previous years, just takes a full holistic look at the size, growth, evolution of this market, the lessons that we are learning, the key issues that are influencing the growth, health, and dynamics within the market, and then the factors that we are looking out for that could influence the future of New York's market. And for example, one of the issues that we're going to be considering under the annual report will be the fast-moving developments related to federal legalization of federal policy reform. So 3 big studies. There's going to be some or quite a lot of connective tissue between the 3 of them. We'll certainly be working with the stakeholders around this table and in the market to do the storytelling on these key themes related to the market. But wanted to ensure that this subcommittee was aware that these reports are coming, and we look forward to working with you to ensure that we do our reporting robustly on these themes. So with that, Chair Schaefer, I'll turn this back to you to begin the discussion.
Thank you very much, John. Appreciate that rundown. Interesting data in there. Before we jump into the discussion portion, do any of the subcommittee members have any comments or questions for John after that presentation? Okay, hearing nothing specific. John, I did just have one question. You mentioned the delinquent payment list is posted monthly, but that's updated weekly, correct?
Oh, forgive me. Yes, weekly.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
So really important. That's an important clarification. I don't want folks thinking that they're going to be on the hook for a month before they can get taken off.
Yeah, no, it's weekly, and I think it's Wednesdays or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. Hearing no other comments or questions on John's report. I'll jump right into it. I apologize for the next meeting here. I know we're running over, but there's a few things we do want to talk about in this subcommittee meeting. So I'll jump into the first is just a continuing conversation regarding track and trace. License holders received another notice recently in the last couple of weeks regarding track and trace, specifically BioTrack, specifically digital UID numbers. And we want to, as a subcommittee, I think just want to talk about track and trace in general speak here, and ensure that the steps we're taking with track and trace are in line with the original intent of track and trace, right? And so some of the questions in discussions are ensuring that we're not just piling on expenses here and asking for additional administrative duties and extra expense for people throughout the supply chain. When we're especially when we're talking about UIDs and for people that don't know, they're digital, essentially digital IDs that are assigned to crops at various stages of production, in simple terms. And so if we're asking license holders to pay an additional fee for these UIDs, we want to, number one, make sure it's not redundant. We want to make sure it's in line with the intent of track and trace. So that's one piece of this. The other piece of this is we're unclear still about the timeline for implementation. So there's a lot of angst in the industry about track and trace and BioTrack implementation, and we're trying to ease some of that angst and make sure that what we're asking license holders to do is in line with the intent of track and trace. So, for example, is track and trace, is the intent to be a tool for reporting? Is it intended to confirm tax revenue? Is it intended to prevent transshipping of product from out of state? Is it intended to give us an ability to recall product? Is it all of the above? And if so, are these new asks by the OCM in line with those intent in really achieving those objectives? And I think it's just an important conversation to have before we just ask everybody to do this. So I think it's an important discussion. So again, twofold: requesting for an updated timeline of where we're at with implementation of BioTrack as a track and trace, and request for clarification of the intent of track and trace to make sure it makes sense. So I just want to open that up for discussion.
John, just before, I assume you're going to give the answer. So it is a little bit after 1 when we were supposed to start the meeting of the full Cannabis Advisory Board. And I will do some opening remarks in a minute, but the second agenda item on the Cannabis Advisory Board agenda was related to the Industry and Market Subcommittee. So we're going to use that time now to continue the conversation that Pete has started. And John, if you can give a full but brief answer to Pete's two questions to start us off, that would be great.
Thank you. Brief about BioTrack. So maybe I'll start with the second question first, which I think is a really important question on why is cannabis one of the few plants, one of the few sectors of the economy where you have a seed to sale system in place. And seed to sale, as it sounds, is really a system, a technology-based ecosystem that allows you to track every single plant from the moment it goes into the soil to the moment that it ends up on retail store shelves and ideally into the consumer's basket. There's several reasons driving this, and I think you enumerated many of those reasons, Pete. It is to ensure full traceability so that we know where the products have come from and we have a good understanding of production and sell-through. It helps the office understand our supply chain. This market is growing very, very quickly, and the more we understand about how much is being produced and how much is coming kind of in the ground, we can anticipate, we can future cost our sell-through, and that tells us, where we are on the capacity basis. Absolutely critical for recalls, understanding which batches. If you're trying to initiate a recall, understanding and being able to trace back products back to their points of origin. And the utility of these type of data is that it actually makes recalls far more targeted. So you're not having to recall everything produced by a farmer if it appears that it's a small batch or a small case instance. Right now, we are seeing a deluge of product being diverted out of legal markets in other legal states and being diverted into New York, not necessarily into our legal market, but being diverted into the state. Managing diversion and ensuring that, one, we aren't having product flowing out of our ecosystem, and two, that we're not having product from other jurisdictions being inverted into our legal market is a critical piece. So being able to use these data or these systems to ensure that what we are producing and selling in New York is grown and made in New York is vitally important. So the seed to sale system also, finally, it helps with reporting, significantly helps with reporting because it creates an automated system for the office to be able to fully track what is quite a complex market. We have tried to take the lessons from other jurisdictions that have implemented seed to sale and try to adapt the implementation protocol for New York to reflect the particular aspects of our market. But we do understand this is going to be a substantive change from the way things have been done today. On timing, we are still looking at this being the switch being turned on in late summer, at which point our producers will have 60 days to then get onto the seed to sale system. So for folks who have been concerned about having to start doing this, particularly during planting season right now, I don't think that's going to be as much of a concern. You'll have time to focus on putting seeds in the ground and getting your cultivation operations prepped. And for those of you who are transitioning, you'll have time to get through what we understand is going to be a phenomenally busy season. But we're hopeful that the extra time that it has taken for us to ensure that the system is dialed in has given folks to focus on their other priorities so that, and allow the other systems that they use to prepare for this integration, which we believe will help make things quite a bit easier. I will say, while we're certainly kind of open to continuing this discussion on ensuring that the implementation of this is kind of balances the twin objectives of enabling us to achieve all of our reporting and data reporting and consumer protection requirements, but also we want it to be minimally disruptive to our operators. We're certainly not trying to make work for the sake of it. Getting onto the systems may take a little time, and we're certainly going to be working closely with our licensees to make sure that folks have the support that they need to deploy these systems. But we are still a couple of months out, and then you'll have the 60 days post access to the API to be able to implement this. We'll work very closely with the licensees to ensure that this can be done in as seamless a way possible.
Thank you, John. I think it's thank you for the timeline. That's helpful. Late summer. I think it's important to just reiterate that many of the objectives are already being accomplished by way of GMP requirements, especially as we move processing of flower into under the umbrella of processing licenses now. And they're required to have GMP certification. Many of those objectives are required in GMP certification. So I just want to make sure we're not being redundant and asking people, number one, to do more work, and number one, to incur extra cost for systems that may already be in place if there's another tool. So specifically, the industry just wants to take a second look when you're asking them to purchase a UID digital ID for 10 cents for every digital tag. Just to be clear, that's the recent notice that the license holders were given. What that translates into, if somebody has to plant 20,000 auto flowers in a 1 acre crop, that's an additional $2,000 expense. We were just very mindful of waiving cultivator licensing fees, and then right on the coattails of that, we hit them with a digital UID tag fee for track and trace, when a lot of those things can be accomplished in other ways. So I think it's an important conversation to have in the interest of time. Unless anybody has any other comments, I just wanted to put that out there.
Valuable and noted feedback, Pete, and we'll certainly take this one back.
Can I just I'll be brief on this one in terms of the timeline. So you're expecting that for everyone harvesting in, let's call it October 1st, they'll have their plant tags on their plants prior to harvest, because post-harvest, it'll be pretty difficult if we're talking about individual UID plant tags. And not that we're going to resolve that issue now, but it's something to pay attention to. And to Pete's point about the intent of BioTrack and the track and trace systems, it always comes down to enforcement. And I think we see what's happening from the California market, where at least 50% of their supply chain is leaving their state and coming here. So I think that's, definitely something to be aware of, because it kind of right now, it does feel like a double whammy, both of the cost and the way that BioTrack's being implemented here. Not only is it a plant tag, it's a 10-cent UID on every time you transfer the material and it changes form, plus every case of pre-rolls, etc., which I think is not common in most other states. So I think there's just like a few, little implementation things we might want to look at later this year after the harvest season, really, or right before the harvest season, depending on what the goal is on the plant tags. Yeah. Cool. That's it.
Yeah, just to bookend that, I think it's in everybody's interest to confirm we're getting the tax revenue. I mean, that's the point of this body, right? And make sure there's not. We need a mechanism for controlling transshipping from out of state, and ensuring we can recall. So all those things are important. I'm not trying to skirt those. Just want to have a discussion for redundancies and additional fees. So that's the point of that discussion. But I'll switch gears to the PLMA discussion. In the interest of time, I'll try to highlight just a couple of things and again, pose some questions. Maybe, John, you can give us some direction. But one was just a better discussion of brand licenses. That topic was broached before, and there are brands existing and unlicensed brands, right, that are using white labeling as a way to get to the market. So what is, are there applications out for brand licensing? I'm sorry if we've already gone over this, but do we know how many people have applied for those? Is there a deadline for when brand licenses when a brand must have a license in order to operate in New York? And have any been awarded yet? Can you talk to that a little bit as part one of the PLMA discussion?
Sure. So we envision brands operating in this space in two ways. One is by securing the Type 3 processor license, which is the brand license. The other as a TPI within an existing either producer or processor whose authority you would be operating under. The distinction there being if you if you get a Type 3 processor license, then you have the ability to kind of minimally kind of touch the product. You can package and label the product. If you are doing it as through a branding agreement, as a TPI within an operator, then you would not have the ability to touch the plant. Then the company you're working with, the cultivator or processor you'd be working with, would be the only one who'd have the authority to do those. So there are a couple of ways in which you can do this, but in both cases, the brands themselves would be required to adhere to all of our standard rules. For the cultivators or processors who have brands operating under their authority, then if they're operating under your authority, you have some responsibility to, since we may not necessarily be, we will not have regulatory oversight over those brands, the responsibility for compliance adherence falls onto the company who is managing those brands, or who's producing and distributing those brands. So just something to be aware of if you're a cultivator or processor, whether that's kind of the responsibility you want to assume in this market. There's no deadline to apply for the Type 3 processor license. The intent was to open it up, and once we open it up, we keep it open. We certainly welcome folks to apply for this Type 3 license. We think it's going to be a critical way to significantly expand brand diversity in the market without necessarily without creating new supply, since most of these are either kind of buying flower or value-added products from the Type 1 and Type 2 manufacturers. The Type 3 processors, the brand license creates a vector by which you can sell more product without having to create more supply in the market. So we were not intending to cap the number of Type 3 processor licenses we will issue. We will keep that brand application open. I'll need to confirm whether we've issued any from the November application cycle, but we're certainly going to start issuing those at pace in short order. That was part of the supply side licenses that we're starting to issue from the November and December application window. But we're expecting to see quite a lot of interest in this license, and we're welcoming brands from New York, brands from across the country to come in and participate in this market.
Okay, just to clarify that, there is no brand license. It's either a Type 3 processor license, or if a brand is interested in coming up with an agreement with an existing processor or cultivator, then that is just under a TPI agreement, right?
Yes, that's right. That's right. We've been using the Type 3 processor license we've been calling that the brand license internally, but forgive me. Yes, that is the Type 3 processor license, and it does authorize you to package and brand the product. So you become a regulated entity in the state, but with nominal kind of product touching authority.
Got it. Okay, there are two other points I want to make. I'm going to throw them both out there and then up for discussion. But there was some discussion in last meetings on event licensing and or the idea of merging the idea of a grower showcase and allowing licensees to table at stores, and having a pathway to education direct from brands. Any update there for us?
Yes, this is an issue that's moving with some speed. The office is working on developing regulations governing events, which will begin as ostensibly an adaptation of the model under which we were operating the cannabis grower showcases. We've certainly taken a lot of lessons from that, and are working to get that done. There's going to be two parts to getting this event authorization approved. One is a legislative component, so we're working to try and get approval of that component, but we're in parallel developing regulations that would authorize this, so that once we have the legal authority to do this through the legislative process, then we'll spool up the regulations for this and hopefully get this thing rolled out quite quickly. The regulations will need to go through the standard kind of public comment period and process, but we certainly see the interest in this. We think it's a very significant opportunity to both expand consumer access and provide opportunities, as you say, for consumer education. We will be changing some of the rules, at least as currently proposed or currently envisioned. Yes, you will still be able to showcase, but there's no, some of the rules that we had for the Cannabis Grow Showcase around representation and product minimums and number of licenses you have to participate, all of that goes away. I think, we can allow this to operate as a free truly kind of free market sort of way. So retailers would be able to do this on their own without having cultivators or processors be with them, though they would have the ability to have cultivators and processors also participate. If the cultivators or processors participated, it would be on a showcase basis, not on a retail basis. The kind of all of the other standard reporting requirements would still apply. So this one is moving as quickly as one can move when you require legislative authority and approval of the regulations. But we're kind of on the cusp of kicking off both of those elements, and should have the event permit ready to go, we believe later this year. So we expect later this year.
Thank you for moving that forward. We look forward to an update. I just have one last comment, and it's for future discussion. I think some information that we would love to see as a subcommittee in the future from OCM data would be, this is really high level information, but any data you have to help us in the future, if there's any information regarding what the current supply side capacity is versus the current retail need. I think that's an important discussion for this subcommittee to have going forward as we talk about things and make recommendations to the board with regards to licensing and things like that. I think that's important information to have. Current supply side capacity versus retail market needs. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes complete sense. And maybe two quick points there. One, we'll be able to give a readout of where we see the supply side based on where we will be in licensing by the time we get to the next board meeting, which will actually give us quite a bit of clarity on where the conditional cultivators, what type of licenses they ultimately apply to transition to. Because of the production caps for each type of license, we'll have much better visibility on what the maximum kind of capacity thresholds might be there. Two, it's been interesting to see. We've been seeing new brands coming on the market faster than we can keep up with the data coding around this. I had a meeting about this yesterday, and our kind of data analytics team is working furiously to try and kind of code and understand how that side is evolving in terms of brand diversification and product innovation in the marketplace. And then we will certainly have a much clearer sense of retail sell-through by the time we reconvene. So happy to provide a detailed readout then. Two, this question on supply side capacity and retail alignment is one of the critical aspects that we're going to be looking at in the year-end market report. So it's going to take us a little while to do that piece, but it is something that we're certainly going to be looking at very closely, and happy to report out on that as we work to the larger report out at the end of the year.
Okay. Thank you. Any other discussion or any other points open for discussion?
Pete, real quick, you mentioned the PLMA regs, and we kind of glossed over it. And John, you had mentioned that they were being looked at again potentially. Can you just explain what's going on with those so we're aware as a subcommittee?
Sure, and I'll actually turn it over to my colleague Lila Hunt, who has popped up. So, Lila, welcome back. If you could give the readout on PLMA.
In 3 minutes.
Yes, you got it, Chair. So, Joe, thank you for the time, and Alan for the question. We're just receiving comments on packaging, labeling, marketing, and advertising, or PLMA regulations right now. We're starting to get them from Canny membership. And so in the interest of time, Alan, I would say, our runway here is a medium-sized, meaning we're expecting these to have a timeline of the middle of the summer. So if we can start to get comments sooner rather than later, you can submit them to the regulations shared mailbox, but copy John and myself. We'll make sure we're going through those comments from the subcommittee members. That would be a great bit of feedback and collaboration that we would very much so welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Lila.
Thanks, Alan.
Great. Thank you very much.
About revisiting these.
Got it.
There's potential for maybe the subcommittee to have a working meeting to propose some suggestions on that. Okay, any other points of discussion on the subcommittee? All right, hearing none. Thank you for the discussion today. May I please have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Right. Thank you. Any discussion or comment by any board member? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Hi.
All right. Opposed, abstentions? All right, motion to adjourn this meeting carries. Thank you all. Thanks for, so I apologize for the delay. Thanks for everybody's patience. And we will now adjourn. Thank you.
All right, we are going to move right into our meeting of the Cannabis Advisory Board. As I mentioned at the beginning, my name is Joe Bellick. I'm the chair of the Cannabis Advisory Board. We have a majority of our board members present either in person or joining us via live stream due to extraordinary circumstances. I want to start just by, again, thanking Roswell for hosting us and their generosity. I want to acknowledge the Cannabis Advisory Board members who are here in person, many of whom reside here in Buffalo, and it's important that we do these meetings around the state and not just in New York City or Albany. So here in person, we have Chandra Redfern from Buffalo, Alan Gandelman, who needs no introduction, Sarah Ravenhall, who's with the New York State Association of County Health Officials, P. Arthur Duncan from Buffalo, and Leonard Skrill, who's with Homes and Community Renewal, and you're also from Buffalo. So as I mentioned, I attended law school here from 1991 to 1994. It's great to be back. I still have a strong connection with the law school. When I attended here, there was a hydroponics store in Cheektowaga. I'm not sure if it's still there. I think it was called Harvest Moon. But I remember going there on several visits while I was attending law school here. I also wanted to, since we're here in Buffalo, acknowledge Assemblywoman Crystal People-Stokes for all of her effort in getting this law passed and her continued advocacy in helping to amend and shape the law and the rollout. I know she meets with Chris Alexander frequently, and I also meet with her and her staff, and she has been indispensable to this process. And also, since we're in her hometown, I wanted to acknowledge and thank the governor and her efforts and her team to try to improve the cannabis market, her focus on enforcement, which Chris is going to talk about in a little bit. But it's terrific to have the level of engagement that we do from the governor and her team right now. And I think it's going to lead to a lot of improvements. As I say at every meeting, this is a challenging effort, creating a new industry from scratch. Chris and his team work tirelessly to try to get this program off the ground with not enough resources or staff. And we should not let any meeting pass without acknowledging their efforts and the work that they're doing. Those of us who are in these positions see every day how hard they're working. We may have disagreements and people may question some of the steps, but nobody should question the 24/7 work ethic and efforts that Chris and his team are putting in. I will just say one thing that I think we all in these roles need to do better at, and that's in customer service to the licensees and potential licensees. We have to remember that OCM is not just the regulatory agency that has to hold licensees and people in the market accountable. We also have to give them customer service, try to answer their questions, and be transparent. These are business owners and potential business owners who have spent a lot of time and their own money and put their financial and their family's financial state at risk. I get a lot of phone calls every week that sound something like, I'm about to open dispensary and I can't get my product list approved. I got proximity protection and it was taken away. I own a farm and I want to set up a farm stand to sell cannabis. These are questions that we need to be able to answer and answer quickly so that these businesses can operate as efficiently as possible. So I think we just all need to remember and focus on the customer service part of what we're doing. Okay, with that being said, I would like to have a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
I'll motion.
Okay.
I second the motion.
Okay. Anyone opposed? All right, with that, we are going to turn the meeting over to OCM's Executive Director, Chris Alexander, to give us an update on a number of items.
Thank you, Chairman Bellick, and I appreciate always the recognition of the work being done by so many here in the background. Shout out to the whole OCM team for all the work that they've been doing, and thank you for acknowledging them. We've got a lot going on right now, and I want to start with a quick legislative update. This budget season and the activity in Albany is going to have significant impacts on the market that we are building here, and I just want to make sure that all of our stakeholders are aware. I'm going to start with enforcement. This obviously has been an ongoing issue and challenge for municipalities across the state. The office has, as of last year, stepped into the role to take the civil enforcement responsibility and work to close down these stores with a primary focus on ensuring that our market has a chance to survive and a secondary or but also primary goal of making sure that products that haven't been properly tested are not entering our supply chain and are being consumed by New Yorkers. And you've heard me for years now talk about the frustration that these shops have caused, and so I'm thankful for the work that's been done to expand our ability to close down these shops. We've been seizing product for a while, but it's been difficult to get the closures done. And now we've got some additional powers to do that. So I'll go through those really quickly. The first thing is we have an expanded authority to padlock stores. And this is the point I was making before. We've been previously been able to inspect and seize product, but had a pretty lengthy court process to get closures done. And so now, with the recognition that these shops, many of these shops are selling products that could likely be contaminated, and a lot of folks selling to young people, we will be issuing immediate padlocks upon inspection, which will be followed by an administrative hearing where folks can present their cases. But we will be moving to padlock these stores on the front end. Landlords who fail to comply will be subject to penalties up to 5 times the rent, or $50,000, and a $50,000 fine for landlords as well. Expanded local authority also allows city governments to adopt their own laws to maintain control of the illicit cannabis sales in their jurisdiction. I think New York City's administrative code changes were included in the actual bill, and our office will be working with municipalities, doing trainings to help them craft and develop their approaches. But the guidelines are in the executive budget. The governor also announced that we will be pulling together a task force of agencies. Obviously, it's been said, we don't have enough people just yet here at OCM. And so utilizing other inspectors, data analysts, other staff from other agencies will be are being pulled together real time to support this effort and start to close these stores down in a broader way. And then lastly, obviously the presence of these shops in the city is concerning, and I want to shout out the New York City Sheriff's Office, who's been a partner through this and who will be helping to take on this action, take on these issues, these shops in New York City. And I just want to, before we move on from this, I just want to say that this is obviously a pretty significant effort. This problem has grown to a significant level. But I want to remind everybody why we did this, why we legalized, why we created these opportunities, and a huge part of that was public health. And ensuring that, if folks are going to be using cannabis, they're able to use product that's been tested properly and has gone through our supply chain. And so, the message to consumers to not shop at these stores, despite how beautiful they may look in some cases, remains. And so we've been really focused on social media and digital campaigns, relaunching our Why Buy Legal campaign to ensure that we're informing consumers of where our regulated legal shops are, and that those are the places they should go to purchase their cannabis and cannabis products. Next slide. We also had some significant changes to our tax structure. 2 or 3 main ones here. The medical excise tax has been reduced from 7 to 3.5% for medical cannabis products. We also have seen the THC potency tax removed, and now a flat wholesale tax being instituted in its place. That's still coupled with the 4% local tax with an effective rate around 13% for the market, which is a solid base. We have seen competitive pricing across our market, so pleased to see these steps taken, but also know that we're always going to be fine-tuning and making sure that we're staying at a price point where consumers continue to appreciate. And as from John's report, we'll see that they have been participating and shopping at our stores. And then next slide. I'll just provide a quick licensing update on where we are right now. We have currently 139 card licensees with locations that are operating or approved retail locations. Some are operating, some are about to open imminently. We still have our 9 TDOs, which will be transitioning shortly, but we do have 333 approved retail dispensary locations, and folks with provisional licenses rather, that are still in process, which would include the adult use folks from hard program as well as from the most recent windows. I want to point to one stat that's actually not here, and that is just the amount of locations that have been protected across the state, which we've presented at previous board meetings, which shows the footprint of potentially viable retail locations, which continues to be very geographically diverse. And we can send around those numbers in a bit. But there's a lot of locations that have been identified and folks going through the process of completing their build out and finishing up. And just a note on licensing, obviously this continues to be a complicated and arduous process. Big shout out as always to our licensing team who are doing the best they can to continue to move through these complicated applications and ensure that New York's operators are folks who are ready and eligible to operate in the state. There's a lot of different levels of review. And as always, I always, push on applicants to make sure they're being responsive. And I know that there can definitely be frustration when you feel like you've sent in information, but maybe didn't send it in the right way, and the office has to kind of take that step to correct. And so we'll continue to fine tune our process, and of course, looking forward to some additional resources to move a bit faster. Next slide. And of course, one thing that we haven't ever lost sight of is our commitment to making sure that the licensees and the supply chain is diverse. The numbers that you see here on the screen, just around 40% of majority minority owned businesses, is obviously a significant increase when compared to the rest of the country. But we've also seen, strong representation across all of our C categories in our supply chain and in the applicants who are currently under review. I believe 67 or so % of which were C. So we are really proud to be building on a market that represents real New Yorkers, and 57% right now of our adult use licenses are C owned, and this is really, really important for us. This is the mandate that we were given, and why we spent so much time trying to ensure that folks that we're giving these opportunities to are able to hold and grow their businesses. Before handing the mic over to John, I just want to just one quick note on, obviously changes coming down on the federal level. The U.S. Department of Justice recommended that cannabis be scheduled as Schedule III controlled substance, representing a seismic shift in cannabis policy across the country that we expect will reduce barriers for operators in the supply chain and hopefully reduce hurdles to conducting research on cannabis and more. We'll be monitoring what happens on the federal level. This will, from our intel, will take some time, but we will definitely be preparing our market for what comes next. And of course, we still look forward to a more comprehensive approach that does what we've done here, which is acknowledge the harms as well of prohibition and ensures that people who have been impacted have a path forward. At this time, I'll pass it over to John for our market update, abridged from our last subcommittee meeting.
Yes, I was going to say, John, is this basically the same update you just gave?
I was literally about to say almost exactly the same thing, but I saw that there's a lot of folks who are already in the room.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll just actually just pick up on a point that Chris had made about the map, which is that we've reviewed nearly 900, I think it's now over 900 locations for proximity protection, which gives us a really good indication of how much retail is about to come online. That's the number of locations that have received proximity protection. But in terms of the numbers, I think most board members have a copy of the deck and were attended the last round, so I don't need to.
I mean, I think, the takeaway from your update that you just gave earlier is the $132 million in retail sales year to date. Which is basically, we're not even halfway through the year, and we're basically at the same number, or close to it, for the entire year last year. So if you need any evidence of growth in what we're doing, I think, these are the numbers.
Yeah, I think just one thing to add, as John was doing his presentation during the subcommittee meeting, is just, remembering what it takes to scale this market. We had estimates at the start of this way back when that we would go about 5 years till we got to a mature market. And at the range of the size of that market, it would be, low estimates, 5 billion, and could go significantly higher from there. There's a ton of road ahead. But I think the continued growth and momentum is John's favorite word, is definitely indicative of the fact that, one, consumers are transitioning to our stores. These businesses are getting more efficient in their operations as well. And I think that what is, most important here is that we are really, the fact that we've been able to grow in the way that we've been able to grow with such a small business footprint is something that really should be recognized, because that is the challenge, right? Is how do we ensure that this opportunity is being spread across different economic situations, and I think we've been able to achieve at least the start of that here.
And I didn't know I don't want to put Alan on the spot, but I'm going to put Alan on the spot. A lot of the farmers and growers that I'm hearing from are telling me that they're concerned about being able to grow this year and are worried about keeping up with the demand. Could you give us a few minutes on that, Alan?
Are you hearing they're worried about keeping up with the demand, or that they don't know if they can grow this year because their license is in
Correct.
transition?
The latter.
Their license is in transition. Yeah, so this is a tough one. A lot. I don't know the numbers. We're not sure how many AUCCs who are doing an outdoor grow are transitioning to a micro business, and so we have kind of a fork in the road. The AUCCs who are continuing their outdoor are mostly fine because they, like John, you said, they can keep doing what they're doing this year, and they're not going to be affected by this June 30th deadline. The other, I think the fork is for people transitioning to a greenhouse or transitioning to a micro. They don't necessarily want to plant an outdoor crop and then get their transition in the summer and not be able to move into their greenhouse or start their micro. So I think just in terms of the timing of the licenses, there is some concern about, if that's what you're asking, Joe, that people might be doing another outdoor grow, even though maybe they wanted to move into the greenhouse or they wanted to move into the micro. So there's people stuck there. And then in terms of the supply chain that we talked about, we're not totally clear on how much material is left over from 2022/23. Obviously with this kind of growth, it's starting to make its way through the system. There's definitely still a lot of material sitting in storage. I know that for sure. And I know the commodity prices are continuing to decline. So which is gonna happen until we level out at I think the original projection was a couple hundred stores, which sounds like we're on our way there. So I think a lot of people are just in limbo in terms of they're not sure what to do for this year. And it's May 7th and people are starting their seeds now-ish. So, Joe, if that's kind of the feedback you're getting, I think, that's the general summary.
And I think
Yeah.
anything OCM can do to address this transition issue would be helpful, because I think it's causing a lot of the growers some angst who are in that situation.
Yeah, I could just comment and just say that, obviously, there's a lot happening at the same time, and we'll definitely be prioritizing the review of those transition applications so folks aren't waiting too long. We tried to provide as much notice, obviously, at the start, but knew that, things would be tight at the end of this window for that program. But thankfully, a good amount of folks did apply at the end of last year, and those are still moving. But of the group that just submitted this week, we'll be going through that and trying to push those out as quickly as possible. And I think we've already submitted communications out this week around kind of the associated activities. I think that communication went out this week, and if it didn't, then it will come soon. Processing and distribution as well, but we're going to try to provide as much clarity as possible. But yes, the only, I think, help is that we had this earlier window where a bunch of folks were able to get in.
I'm curious, do you know off the top of your head, Chris or John, how many people waited to apply to the last minute for that transition?
I don't rent you about half. Well,
It was less than half, but it was a bigger number than we had.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where I think a lot of the,
So just so that to level set for the audience and for the board members, part of what's creating some of the squeeze now is that a lot of folks waited until the last minute. We've been ringing this bell for a long time because we were precisely worried about this.
every meeting,
Yeah.
get it in.
So, we started ringing this bell in September because we knew it was going to be a process, that there was going to be review required, that we were going to be dealing in parallel with the adult use application window when it opened. And so we accepted the first wave of applications through the end of last year, reopened the application at the beginning of the year, and have continued to accept applications. But the position we've been trying to avoid for months was where we were getting in fact, part of the reason why we set the deadline for May 5th was because we didn't want to be getting in applications on June 29th for people whose authorizations were going to end on June 30th. For reasons that I hope we'll someday understand, there's a lot of folks who waited till the very last minute to make their calls. And we understand these are complicated decisions that have real implications for how your business wants to grow. But because of that delay, it's meant that, we've got all of these materials now that we need to review for a very large number of producers, and whose transition is going to be governed by the review of these submissions. At the same time that we're reviewing the adult use side as well. We are moving furiously to try and get through these reviews for everyone. But the delay in when we got these applications in, and the number of applications that we got in right at the finish line, is going to mean that we do need a little time now to process them.
Thank you. And I think that, we continue to be frustrated as a CAB that we're not consulted more by the CCB and have more input. But I think this type of discussion shows exactly why it's important to bring this up, because there are two sides to all of these concerns, and we hear anecdotes from people who call, and then there's another side to it that people are waiting and putting additional pressure on the resources of OCM. So I think just this brief discussion underscores what the role of the CAB is and can be in providing a forum for talking about all of the issues that were raised in the market subcommittee, the licensing, these types of issues, so that we can vet them and try to collectively get to the best place. So thank you.
yeah, and I'll just say that the TPI process can be extensive depending on your business structure. And unfortunately, as I've experienced, sometimes the OCM emails go into the junk folder and you miss them for 2-3 weeks. And that puts you weeks behind. So I will just also stress for any license holder still waiting, check that junk and spam folder like every single day, because stuff for me definitely ended up in there for some strange reason.
All right, community grants.
Yes, I think our team on Ally will give me an update here.
Okay, and just before Ally begins, I just want to say briefly that we are in the process of hiring somebody to help us launch the community grants reinvestment. Are moving through the interview process, and I'm hopeful that the CAB will have a person at OCM soon to help us get this off the ground and work with Chris and his team and the CAB to have a successful rollout of our fund. So, Ally?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to having someone come on, but in the meantime, happy to give you a brief update of where we're at. So our working group, which We've met you guys before in our subcommittee meeting, but it includes members from the social and economic equity team and the policy team. So we're kind of partnering up, and we've been drafting up a grant opportunity focused on ensuring that the pilot year of the Community Grants Reinvestment Fund is successfully distributed to community-based programs across the state of New York. Based off of discussion during the last CGRF committee meeting, the first year's grants will be focused on youth supports as that umbrella, and on the pillars that the subcommittee expressed that should be the main focal points, which would be workforce, housing, and mental health services. So we've been in discussions, we've been drafting, and now we're in discussions with OGS to iron out just some of the grant's final details with this draft. And once that draft is complete, we are planning on sharing with the CAB subcommittee for comment and discussion. And we want to say that we're aiming to ensure that community-based organizations of all sizes are aware of the steps necessary to apply for this grant. So OCM's external affairs team will be conducting grant readiness sessions in communities across the state prior to the release of the grant application. And these trainings will be designed to help organizations better understand the application process, the statewide financial system, SFS, and the opportunities that come with state grant funding generally. And the launch for those trainings, I believe, is May 21st. And the anticipated release date for the grant application is still expected for this summer, with awards being announced in the fall. That's what I have for the general update, and I'm happy to answer any questions. But yeah, we're just working on getting it drafted and shared as soon as we can. I can pass it back to Chair Bellick.
Thank you. And just let me be clear, since we're here in Buffalo, these grants are going to be given out throughout the state. They're going to be given out in this community and other communities that were disproportionately impacted. It's been a goal of Chris and the governor and the CAB to make sure that we make the most use of these dollars and put them back into communities like Buffalo. So we are hoping this is going to be a very positive and transformative effort across the state. So, Chris, is there anything else you wanted to update us on?
No, I just, obviously getting some additional support to lead this effort. And so, the interviews around that are conducted, as you said. And just as far as the drafting of the RFA, it's obviously an iterative process. And so excited to share a draft with you all imminently as we just kind of finalize this with OGS, finalize the draft for your input. So just excited to keep moving forward.
Is there a can you guys hear me? Sorry, this is Ebro.
Yep. Yes.
Is there a way for us to provide some more concrete timelines around the rollout of not only the actual policy around this, but times tables on, when we would be able to get dollars into the community? Are we at that stage yet?
So a lot of this just depends on like how long things take with OGS. So we are still on track to get things out in the application out in the summertime, like we talked about in that first meeting, as long as things go well with OGS and we can get eligibility handled and make sure that we're prioritizing communities across the state, because we're trying to really focus on CDI and underrepresented areas, make sure that people are aware of this grant. So it's still on track for that, still on track for the money to be, or the awardees to be announced in the fall. But as far as the disbursement of the funds, I don't think at liberty to say like exactly when that's going to happen, but I do know that we're on track for those original dates that we talked about, roughly.
And
Well, I would hope that after we're able to do this, and just like many things we've done, things can take time when you're doing it the first time. But in years to come, hopefully we can kind of lock into a calendar and a cadence, so that the community, communities that need these funds can depend on us to deliver on that cadence.
Yep, that's completely true. And I think it's just important to note that this is, first of all, the first year. So we're trying to make sure that the pilot round is done right. And it sets sort of a precedent for when we do have somebody full-time on staff. And then things like getting grants out on like a renewal basis can speed things up. Whereas the first round, from what I understand, just takes a little bit longer because, yeah, just the technicalities, but totally agree.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and Ebro, just to say that, yes, that absolutely will be a cadence where folks know, like, this is the time frame, this is the 60 days when we're accepting these grants moving forward. I think the two things I think that are challenging here, outside of just kind of the money being sent out, it's also just making sure that we've thought about and expanded the potential pool of applicants as wide as possible, because once they're in our network, once we've contacted them, it'll definitely be easier next go around to have them trained, prepared, and ready to submit tighter applications. We're seeing that right now with licensing, right, with deficiencies, et cetera. It takes a time for folks to get used to this process. But was that Mark? Was that you? I see your question in the chat.
Yeah. Mark, in response to your question, the materials are being drafted and will be circulated. So there's a subcommittee of the CAB that's working on it. But if you or any CAB member would like to read it and have input into it, we'll make sure that happens.
Yeah, and just to speak to just process wise, I mean, there's generally a form approach to these things, and then we include criteria pulled from the survey responses from previous meetings that we've had with the subcommittee. So it's not something that's kind of a runaway train here. Is full time and space for meaningful engagement with the rest of the CAB.
Yeah. Sarah?
I like clear.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much, Allie and Chris, for the update. Chris, you were mentioning the survey. I believe that all the CAB members had the ability to give input into that. So that's what's being used to create the RFP. Okay, RFA, thank you. Okay, great. So this is exciting to hear. I just want to confirm that in addition to community-based organizations, local government entities are eligible to apply for these grants as well. That includes local health departments, local departments of social service, and local governmental units that provide mental health services in communities.
Yes, at this time, local governments are included. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Can you see the remote people? I have my hand
Yes.
up for a while.
Yes, Alan, we can see and hear you.
All right, thanks. So maybe I missed this. What happened to the harm reduction element that was in this funding? At one point, I mean, Sarah proposed harm reduction as organizations, then it became harm reduction in youth. And I see the harm reduction element has disappeared. What happened to that?
No, not disappeared. I think I think the last conversation we had, I was pointing to the separate funds that are going from our revenue fund to Oasis to conduct some, provide some support. Yeah, the 20% of our revenue goes to support prevention education. So there is that funding that's already moving as part of this, and I think I can, for next CAB meeting, provide an update from them on that. But it was just for this initial award, since there's already a stream of funding going to treatment, prevention, education, et cetera, that we would take this one and focus on a gap that existed. And then as we grow the fund every year, remember this will continue to grow. We'll be able to kind of pull everything back in. If that funding stream isn't operating efficiently, we can always make those changes.
All right, that does not please me. All right, thanks.
Well, I guess that was helpful. So it's a different pool of funding going through Oasis. Are they so are you saying at the next CAB meeting, maybe we can get an update on how that will flow?
Exactly. So remember, there's we got the 40 that are going into this fund that we're talking about now. That 40%, we got 40% going into the state lottery fund to support education. And then that last 20 goes and is administered by Oasis to support the broad arena of drug treatment, prevention, education. And so that was the comment last time, was that, okay, there's a stream of 20% of the revenues that we're bringing in this year that John was just talking about that will be flowing to these programs. It'll largely probably be to existing programs. And then we have a whole list of other items that we have to find a way to fund. And I think the recommendation from the discussion was, let's take this initial award, cover an area that's not being covered. And then as we expand, we can, pull in other parts of that listing from the creation of the fund, that other programs that we can support.
So I just worry that we may not be able, I want to make sure that the voice of the CAB is included in whatever process for funding is happening through OASIS. And I don't know if that's happening yet.
It's not designed exactly in that way, but I think we can definitely, open up those lines of communication so that we can direct those funds in some way.
So do we want to make sure we get an update at the next CAB meeting?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
Yeah, just to point out, when you were talking about, I raised the issue of harm reduction. Twice you mentioned OASIS doing prevention, treatment, and whatever else they do, and didn't mention harm reduction. So you don't see OASIS either as a harm reduction entity.
Yeah. No, I don't think, Alan, there's anything that would prohibit grants going for harm reduction related to youth in this first round. It's broadly defined to impact youth and children, but there's nothing that would prohibit.
No, it's not limiting right now. It's
Yeah.
just what we presented. And plus, as we go through the drafting process, we can amend and update. But the reason I mentioned OASIS in that way, and I didn't explicitly mention harm reduction, is because it's going to be supporting grant programs that they have to create. And so I didn't want to confine whatever programs that are going to come from that funding stream, as I don't know right now. So I'll get that information and come back to you, Alan.
But the elements of the CAB ask for harm reduction. And now you pass that over to OASIS, even though Mary's on the CAB.
Yeah.
But the CAB asked for harm reduction. And just because it was explicit in here before, there was youth and harm reduction. And now there's nothing to preclude anyone applying to do youth and harm reduction, but it was explicit before, not implicit.
All right, well, we
can
can look at that and try to clarify it. I don't think.
This funding is supposed to be addressing the impact of the war on drugs. And there's no clearer evidence of social service agencies that address the war on drugs than harm reduction organizations.
I fully agree, Alan. And I grew up in that space, so I fully agree and understand. So we can when we get the draft, we'll get the draft to you so we can fine tune and make sure that we're capturing any programs that we want to capture.
And we can add it as one of the focal points. I don't think you should walk away from today's presentation thinking that it's not going to be a focal point of what we're doing. So if it's important to, along with mental health and the other items, to specifically call that out, we can do that.
I'm not walking away from this discussion. I have a conflict right now and the meeting started late.
That timing, Alan.
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna throw my chair out the window.
Thank you for your contribution.
So anyway, thank you. And I'll see you at the next meeting, if not before.
Okay.
Thanks. Bye.
All right. Anybody else have anything they want to say before we adjourn? All right. With that, I want to thank everybody for attending and all the board members for participating. We will let you know when our next meeting is. Please note that the information related to the Cannabis Advisory Board is on the website cannabis.ny.gov. And with that, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Seconded.
Anyone opposed?
Second.
All right. Thank you all. And
we have one more subcommittee meeting led by Dr. Junella Chin.
Yeah.
I know we started late. We are all caught up, but we cannot start early. So we do have 6 minutes before the start of that subcommittee meeting. So feel free to refresh yourselves, and we'll be back in 5.
Thank you, everyone.
Drive before.
Okay. All right.
Gotta refresh them.
I was licensed application for start. Yeah. But either I'll play it on my
Why were you here?
I don't know, just eyeball.
I don't know. Well, now you have a chance to talk to everybody.
Yeah. No, price. So wait, you live in the long road zone. Yes. I have to go. And I had to go. Yeah. Because I think it's on to wait. And both of these. Like guys back. This is my. I was one of the. All the applications that my
If we can clear the room to commence the next committee meeting. Thank you. All right, thank you, our one and only.
How about all the people in the room, though? All the people in the room are here. No, they're leaving.
All right. So, Dr. Chin, are you ready?
Yeah, how's my audio?
Excellent. Thank you. With that, we can begin in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Take it away.
Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Janella Chin, Vice Chair of the New York State Cannabis Advisory Board and Chair of the Health, Safety, and Research Subcommittee. It is great to be with you here today for a meeting of the Health, Safety, and Research Subcommittee. And recognizing that we have a majority of subcommittees present, I am pleased to call to order today's meeting. As always, this meeting will be recorded. The transcript will be available to the public on the Office of Cannabis Management's website, cannabis.ny.gov. Live captioning in both English and Spanish is available for individuals viewing the live stream. Additional information on Cannabis Advisory Board meetings are available on the OCM website. Today's subcommittee will include several different items. We'll begin with health and safety updates from the Office of Cannabis Management, then an overview of public health resources, educational materials, and data monitoring activities undertaken by OCM, and we'll conclude with an open discussion from subcommittee members. Now, before our updates from the OCM, we just want to briefly review the focus and membership of this subcommittee. The Health, Safety, Research Subcommittee was organized to provide guidance and recommendations on issues related to public health, health and safety, including compliance, medical cannabis, including the medical cannabis program, clinical and provider topics, as well as issues related to cannabis research. Thank you all again to the subcommittee members who were able to join us both in person and virtually today. Now, to our first update from the Office of Cannabis Management, we'll be hearing from Nicole Rosa, Director of Health and Safety, Nikisha Abel, Deputy Director of Health and Safety, and Lila Hunt, Deputy Director of Public Health and Campaigns. Thank you all for joining us today. I'll turn the floor over first to Nicole Rosa, OCM's Director of Health and Safety.
Thank you, Dr. Chin, and good afternoon, all subcommittee members. Health, safety, and research are critical components of the work that the office does, and we are very excited to be here today to provide some updates to the subcommittee. As you can see on this slide, protecting public health and safety involves a multifaceted approach from the office, where we provide oversight for laboratory testing, as well as inspections and audits, data surveillance, and so much more. We also focus on educational efforts as we develop different policies and procedures for the office. Next slide, please. So I'll get us started with an update on the adult use laboratory testing statistics. So laboratory testing is one of the ways that we work to protect public health and safety of consumers in New York State. The office does require testing for several different contaminants, including things like microbials, metals, residual solvents, pesticides, mycotoxins, moisture content, water activity, health, and foreign material. Licensees whose lots fail this laboratory testing, distributing those lots for sale to consumers. On this slide, you will see that there's a QR code that can be scanned and will provide information about the specific laboratory testing limits for the various contaminants. This table shows a summary of the testing that has been conducted in the adult use market. And as you can see here, that the volume of testing from the fourth quarter of 2023 to the first quarter of 2024 has increased a bit, which is not surprising as it relates to the increase in the dispensary activity in the adult use market as more of these dispensaries become operational. Also looking at the most recent quarter's data, you can see that 95% of the lots passed this laboratory testing for contaminants. Of the 5% that failed testing, the majority of those were for flower products. And the top contaminants that we identified as reasons for failure include aspergillus, metals, and pesticides. These testing safeguards do highlight the importance of the regulated market for products available for consumers. Next slide, please. At our last subcommittee meeting, we shared information regarding the office's public incident reporting form. We have included a QR code here as well, which can be scanned to access the reporting form on the office's website. For those product quality issues that were reported, here's what we found. The majority of those incidents are tied to unregulated entities. So 125 out of the 206 incidents reported were related to unregulated entities that have been forwarded as an enforcement-related matter for investigation. 44 incidents were reported without sufficient detail to evaluate. So, for example, there might not have been information about the dispensary or the location where we couldn't attribute it to regulated versus unregulated, or there was no lot number. So just an inability to trace back for further information. For the remaining 37 incidents that we were able to evaluate, the information didn't substantiate a quality concern that would warrant further actions such as a recall. These are trends that we continue to evaluate as they come in. Next slide, please. And the other piece to the public incident reporting form that we have is the adverse event data. So in addition to selecting product quality concern, the user can select adverse event as their key concern. So for those reports received, 124 or 86.1% again were actually reported related to an unregulated entity. For those that came from regulated entities, we had 16, 3 of which were for medical products and the remaining were for adult use products. Again, in this case, as we monitored those events tied to these regulated products, most of them were typical effects that would be expected with cannabis, such as dizziness or some sort of hypersensitivity or coughing related to inhaled products. We didn't find anything that, again, demonstrated a pattern with multiple lots or multiple products where we had to dig deeper for a quarantine or recall matter. And we'll continue to monitor these steps as well. Next slide, please. And at this point, I will turn it over to Erica Stupp, who will give an update on the Poison Center data.
Thank you. So these data come from the 2 poison centers in New York State, the New York City Poison Center and the Upstate New York Poison Center, and aggregated to give us a state view. And this is showing all of the cannabis-related exposures reported to the poison centers. And last year, there were over 1,500 cases of cannabis exposures reported in New York State, and that included all cannabis product types. And that's an increase from around 600 cases in 2018. And just noting that this increase resembles trends we're seeing nationally as well across the same time period. And as you can see here by the orange bar on the bottom, this increase is primarily driven by the pediatric population, those age 0 birth to 19. And similar to what we are observing in our adverse event reporting, it's really looking like these are primarily products from the illicit market that are packaged in a way to resemble other foods and candies that are typically marketed to children. And this type of packaging is not allowed in the regulated adult use program. Next slide. And of the 1,500, around 1,500 cases reported last year, about 65% of them involved cannabis edibles specifically. So this chart is showing cases of where cannabis edible exposures were reported by age. As you can see, while there's been an increase across all age groups, again, it's really the youngest age group, those age birth to 5 years old, that increased the most. There were only 5 cannabis edible exposures reported among those age 5 and younger back in 2018, and that rose to 368 last year in 2023. And again, Evidence suggests that this increase is primarily driven by those illicit products that are packaged in a way where children can mistake them for other food or candy that they typically eat. We also find from the data that children are most likely to find cannabis products at home and be exposed at home, which is why our public messaging about the importance of safe storage is so critical. And so, as we keep saying to everyone, products should be locked up and stored out of reach and out of sight of young people. And now I will turn it over to Dr. Abel on research updates.
Thank you, Erica, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be sharing some brief updates about the cannabis research license and the medical cannabis program. So Section 38 of the cannabis law provides for a cannabis research license, and this license authorizes individuals to produce, process, possess, and purchase cannabis for research purposes. Earlier this year, the board approved our first 2 cannabis research licenses, and since then we continue to accept new applications on a rolling basis. Go back, please, Rachel. Okay. The office has been providing application support to researchers and encourages anybody who needs assistance completing your application to reach out to the research unit at research@ocm.newyork.gov. Additionally, we are developing educational materials to help encourage interested parties to apply. The office has also been working on efforts to help foster collaborations and support for researchers. Next slide. We are currently working on compiling a list of licensees and others who might be willing to assist applicants. On the screen, you'll find some of the ways one could submit to help a research licensee. That includes donating or selling cannabis or cannabis products, allowing researchers to use your OCM-approved site to conduct studies, assisting researchers with the development of new products, or providing access to testing services or equipment to help support the study. We encourage licensees and other entities willing to support researchers to scan the QR code on the screen and submit the form. Now, despite the critical need for research, we do want to remind everyone that there is still quite a bit of published literature and information available, especially on the clinical applications of cannabis. Next slide. So to help the public, the office has implemented 2 new educational initiatives related to the medical cannabis program. The first is the Medical Cannabis Advisory Council, or MCAC. This is a work group charged with developing clinical guidance documents and resources that will help guide practitioners who might be interested in treating patients with medical cannabis. The council evaluation tools and treatment protocols. The initial focus will be on 4 main clinical priority areas, and they are inflammatory bowel disorders, developmental and behavioral disorders such as ADHD and autism, women's health conditions including endometriosis, ovarian cysts, and pelvic and breast disorders, and mental health conditions such as anxiety, depression, and mood disorders. Next slide. The names of the members are displayed on the slide before you, and we want to extend our deepest appreciation to all of the council members for their commitment to this work. We'd also like to extend a special thank you to Dr. Chin and Dr. Brenda Robinson, who will serve as the chair and vice chair for this council term, which will run about 2 years. Lastly, we want to thank subcommittee members Chin, Claire, and Ravenhall for their assistance in the application review process. The second initiative that the office has implemented is the Medical Cannabis Ambassador Program, or MCAP. These ambassadors are charged with conducting presentations and trainings across the states on topics such as the endocannabinoid system and cannabis patient care. Healthcare providers and other organizations interested in a presentation can submit a request using the QR code on the screen. Before you, you'll find the names of our new ambassadors. And again, we'd like to express our deep appreciation to them for their commitment to advancing cannabis science and education. Next slide. And finally, I am very pleased to announce that on Friday, September 20th, the office will be sponsoring its very first statewide medical cannabis symposium. The event will be held in Buffalo, New York, and will be co-hosted by Roswell Park Comprehensive Cancer Center. This event will be geared towards healthcare providers interested in learning more about cannabinoids in clinical practice. There will be a call for speakers going out soon, and individuals who are interested in presenting should monitor the website found at the QR code on screen. And with that, I will pass it to Lila Hunt.
Thank you, Keisha, and good afternoon, everyone. To sister with the education and outreach opportunities related to the medical cannabis program that Keisha just spoke to, we wanted to give a recap of the recent medical cannabis program campaign that the office launched early this past year. You'll see stats on the screen there that show the reach that we were able to receive with this largely digital run bilingual campaign. We highlighted voices of existing medical providers and medical pharmacist as well as a patient all within the program. We've learned sort of from previous campaign experiences that hearing the voices of individuals with lived experience help to be the best, real ambassadors for the program. So we're excited to see that this ad buy was able to target patients, practitioners, and pharmacists each alike. And we sistered this effort with additional presentations, both online and in person statewide, to make sure that we're continuing to build momentum and garner support for the medical cannabis program as we do that good education and outreach. Next, and this is really to sort of pick up where we last left off with this subcommittee, is we've developed a series of additional educational resources sort of appending on to what was existing. So this is just to highlight those for each of you. So these are based on different program areas or different areas that this subcommittee had identified for the need for additional research. So one is related to concentrates. We know that higher THC products for newer consumers and for folks that are not familiar with them represent a new sort of swath, a new terrain related to cannabis and might have increased risk because of that dose-dependent relationship with THC. So this resource explains what is a concentrate and what safety concerns do folks need to be aware of. We also have a guide to cannabis, and this is outside of the medical cannabis program, but more broadly for adult use, geared towards older adults. And that was something that we'd spoken about the last time the subcommittee met. To build this resource, we met and engaged with service providers who serve older adult communities to really see what areas would be of most interest to those folks. So that sort of fed into the development of that resource. And then the remaining medical cannabis program resources you see highlighted on your screen here were released in addition to the recent medical cannabis campaign, patient rights and protections, practitioner rights and protections. So it's sort of both sides, all sides of the cannabis medical program highlighted, spelled out for folks. So those resources are all available if you scan that QR code, along with a whole compendium of additional educational resources. And then to key in on one resource that we specifically developed with members of the subcommittee here, we've developed this fentanyl and cannabis facts and unknowns. And earlier this afternoon, we heard from Executive Director Chris Alexander about the enforcement related efforts. And there's been a ton of confusion and misinformation related to fentanyl and cannabis. That was a major subject that we explored on our last subcommittee discussion. And so in conjunction, and thank you to Oasis, to Mary Brewster specifically, who's on the line, and to Alan Clear with the Department of Health, we developed this fact sheet to just at its core, first and fundamentally, help make sure that we're addressing the myth of fentanyl in cannabis. There have been 0 verified incidents of fentanyl contamination in cannabis. We continue to see sort of headlines that indicate otherwise, but again, without lab substantiation. That's the point that we wanted to zero in on here. Overarching this discussion, of course, is the safety concern that we speak to all the time, and the fundamental point that we want to make sure is sort of held front and center, which is, with all the uncertainty of what is in the unregulated cannabis supply, the best way to access safer products is from the regulated industry. So that is definitely the number one takeaway. And then also just a special shout out to Sarah Ravenhall and her team, who hosted Oasis, DOH, and OCM all together to address her members, the members of the different local health departments across the state, to help underscore and explain this resource and sort of more broadly the information related to it. So wanted to just follow up from our last subcommittee discussion there. And I'll hand it back to Erica now to walk through some additional essential public health information to highlight.
Sure, thank you. I'm going to share just a few highlights from the International Cannabis Policy Study. It's a rigorous survey of residents ages 16 to 65, and it asks literally hundreds of questions about consumption and purchasing, risk behaviors, perceptions around cannabis and hemp. And it's administered by the University of Waterloo in Canada, and it provides us both New York State and national estimates for comparison. And we're anticipating our 2023 report later this spring, and we'll share that once we have it. But in the meantime, we have data for 2018 to 2022. And here we're looking at method of consumption or mode of consumption reported by people who had consumed in the past year. And so as you can see, unsurprisingly, flower is the most common mode of consumption at the top. However, it has been decreasing over the past 5 years, and that's a trend we're seeing in other surveys and consistent with national rates and rates that we're seeing in other legalized states. Edibles have overtaken vape oils as the second most common method, increasing 60% over that 5-year time period to 59% of consumers reporting that they consumed using edibles in 2022. And while a small proportion of consumers choose to consume cannabis as drinks, tinctures, or topicals, I just call those out as modes that have been increasing by relatively large margins over the past 5-year period. And oral oils, they were the one form that had kind of a larger relative decrease, decreasing from 30% to 24% of consumers. Next slide, please. And here we're looking at people who reported consuming cannabis in the past year. They were asked how did they usually get their cannabis? And they could select more than one source. Just note that. But most consumers purchase cannabis from either a dealer or a friend, and that could have included a delivery component. And indeed, we found that almost half said their purchases included a delivery component from a dealer or friend. About 2 in 5 consumers purchased cannabis from a retail store, but these data were collected in the fall of 2022, so there were not regulated adult use retail stores at the time. So they were purchasing from other retail outlets, not from the regulated industry. About 1 in 5 consumers purchased cannabis from a medical dispensary, and 8% sourced from home grow, and that could have been either growing them on their own or someone else was home growing on their behalf. Next slide, please. Thanks. Another issue that we encounter frequently in our public messaging and in our surveys is consumer confusion about what is cannabis versus hemp and what is Delta-8 THC and other marketed cannabinoids. So in 2022 in the ICPS, respondents were asked about whether they've heard about Delta-8 THC products, but they were also asked about Delta-9 THC, Delta-10, and then also they were asked about a Delta-4, which is a fictional cannabinoid that is not actually marketed, in case anyone was confused for a second, but it was used to gauge misreporting by consumers. And so we can see there's more familiarity with Delta-8 THC with 20% of all respondents, so this is regardless of their consumer status, reported having heard of Delta-8 THC in New York State. It's also interesting to note that the purple bar is jurisdictions in the United States where cannabis is not legal, and that has the highest awareness of Delta-8, which might speak to the strength of hemp markets in those jurisdictions. But it is interesting to see that the same proportion of New Yorkers reported having heard of Delta-9 THC, which is really your classic THC, the same amount reported having heard of Delta-4. So it really makes you question what people understand and what they're responding to. And then on the bottom, it shows that of those people who did report that they have heard of Delta-8 products before, 23% also reported having consumed Delta-8 products. And so it'll be interesting when we get our 2023 report. We're excited to share that with you because they did some expanded questioning around cannabinoids and familiarity with what people know about marketed cannabinoids. So that will be helpful to look at together. So thank you all for your time today, and I'm going to turn it back to Committee Chair, Dr. Chin. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. At this time, I'd like to open the floor to subcommittee members for any discussion.
If I could, I just wanted to give a big shout out to the team and really to point something out here that I think has been lacking for some years, but also lacking across the country, and that's the investment that the state is making in the medical program. You all just saw a list of programs, of events, of educational opportunities, of resources, and of dollars going behind New York's medical program. And so I just wanted to reaffirm our commitment to making sure that we would be a state where our program grows after legalization, not shrinks. And so thank you to the team for the work that they continue to do, and you, Dr. Chin, for leading the subcommittee.
Yeah, this is Sarah. I think the data is really exciting and great to share. I can't wait to see more from 2023. I'm really interested in and concerned about health disparities and some of the unintentional exposures of the product. And I saw the poison control data, and I understand that this is incidences from both the unregulated market as well as potentially the regulated market. But I'm wondering if any of that data could be extrapolated or overlaid with residents' income in that area, like average income in that area, ethnicity, race, maybe language. I don't know what is collected by poison control, but looking at health disparities is something that is really of interest to me, and perhaps OCM has plans to do that already, but.
Yeah, that is definitely on our list of things that we want to look at. The thing with the Poison Center data is it's based on what the caller provides and what they're able to get. So it's not always, the primary purpose is to address the exposure. And so sometimes some of those demographics information are missing, or they aren't able to get it in follow-up. But I think the idea of using potentially geography and other data sources to just kind of see if there's some association there is a good idea.
Absolutely. I would also add that, there's some great data out of Colorado from the Rocky Mountain Poison Control Center. So I think, if in the areas where our data might be lacking, if there's other states that might have some data to help supplement, we could do a bit of a cross-jurisdictional analysis to take a look at that. Great cross-section, Sarah, for sure.
I think that's great. And then Chris, you had mentioned the investment in the medical cannabis program, which that's absolutely wonderful to hear. Can you speak at all as to what OCM is doing in regard to affordability of medical cannabis for those who can't access it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously the tax change was really helpful. And folks wanted the legislature to go further, and I think we're in agreement that we want to make sure that this program is accessible as possible. We have investigated or looked at programs where we can create funds to support purchasing of medical cannabis by patients in the state. Those are still in the early process of formation, but something that we think will make a lot of sense. Obviously, allowing our registered organizations to also participate in the adult use side comes with some strings, including commitment to patient affordability plans that have been submitted now by our registered organizations, and those include programs that they can use to provide discounts, et cetera, to patients in the program. Those are some off the top. Nicole, you wanted to add anything there?
Yeah, no, I think you hit the key points. And as you all know, we did, release an application for additional registered organizations. So with that comes, an expanded marketplace with more access points, for consumers, as well as a different, selection of product availability. So, the monitoring the economics of the market there with the additional players over the next several months.
I have a quick question for safe storage, just going back to the increase reporting for poison control. the safe storage education is mandatory for the adult use dispensaries, right? They have to educate consumers on that.
Yeah, Dr. Chin, I can take this one. So a few things to flag there. Number one, across all of our educational campaigns, we continue at the office side to message around the importance of safe storage. I think that's one of the areas where you see with safe storage, it's a combination, really addressing the issue is a combination of policy, a combination of education, and education has to be from both the consumer side and from the regulatory agency side. With our other health agency partners, I know that this is a message that they continue to echo and share as well. And then in terms of the dispensary requirement, two things. So our dispensaries make available our OCM-driven educational materials. Some of the local health departments have started to develop those materials as well. And then we also will be offering later in the summer a course that's required of all staff members across the supply chain, actually, in New York State, which will be responsible workforce training, which I think is an area that this subcommittee might be interested in. So we'll continue to provide updates to this group as that rolls out. We're really excited to be able to be really the only state that's developed our own course content there. And so the safe storage message is front and center.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Speaking of that, local health departments are just preparing for their busy season, going out into communities, running their community fairs, working with community-based organizations to provide education. And I don't want them to forget that cannabis safety should be on whatever messaging they're giving out. Is there any update on like the printing clearinghouse and getting things? Or I'll just send out a blast reminder to have them include whatever's on the OCM website when they're going out.
Unfortunately, at this time, Sarah, I think the latter is the answer. We definitely want to be able to prioritize having more but right now we're pointing to QR codes, website resources, and any support that we can get on the local level will be most welcome and appreciated while we wait to have more of a long-term solution for hopefully mass printing.
Got it. On it.
I wonder also
if I was going to say if there's opportunities for participation and joining our external team. There's a lot of education events, and I want to volunteer them to come out and support some of these health fairs if possible, or even our ambassadors.
Yeah, I was just about to say that, utilizing the ambassador program and making sure to loop in those safety precautions. Yeah,
that's great.
Dr. Abel, could you talk a little bit about, I know you said there were 2 research licenses. Is there any feedback from those licensees as to any challenges initiating research?
So they haven't reported any challenges initiating research. I think on the onset during application, there was some questions and some support we needed to provide them to get through that. A lot of these applicants that we're seeing are small businesses, and so perhaps they haven't put together a research protocol or understood all the requirements in the application. But no real issues starting their research. We have engaged with other researchers who are having some trouble with maybe getting approvals or finding funding to support their studies, and so that was kind of the genesis of that collaborators list, so that we could start making some connections for them to help foster that support.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Any other questions from subcommittee members? All right. Well, thank you all, to our members for participating in today's meeting, and to everyone who's joined us in person, and to those who are watching via live stream. Important note on the next Cannabis Advisory meeting, please note that the time, location, and live stream link will be shared on cannabis.ny.gov in advance of the next Cannabis Advisory Board meeting. A recording of today's meeting minutes and a transcription will be posted as well. This concludes our business today. May I please have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I'll motion.
So moved. Thank you. May I have a second on the motion? I guess I can second. Just us?
I think we heard a second.
Dr. Chin, I feel like you could second it.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, I can second. All right. I will call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. All right. The motion to adjourn this meeting carries. Thank you all for joining us today, and don't forget to stay tuned for our full Cannabis Advisory Board meeting. Oh no, that's it. I guess that's it. We'll adjourn. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for your patience today. We can now end our live stream. Thank you to members of the public for being patient with us and sharing some time with us here today. See you soon.
Thanks.